Every religious system that I'm aware of has a story or a group of stories about the origins, where we came from. Trying to answer the big questions: why are we here? How did we get here? How are things organized? Those origin kinds of questions. Jews and Muslims and Christians share a common beginning. There are two stories that form the framework for our understandings about God and about ourselves in each of those three major religions: Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. If you look at the book of Genesis and go not to the first chapter, but to the beginning of the second chapter, you will find one of those stories, which is the older of the two stories we're going to find there. In this older, more primitive story, there's a single man on a barren earth. An earth that God transforms into a beautiful garden. And the man liked the garden, was happy in the garden, but the man was lonely. And so God created a woman from the man, from a bone nearest to his heart. And all was well. They were put in charge of this beautiful garden, and so life begins in that story in innocence and beauty. That's the oldest story. That's one in the second chapter. But our faith tradition has a second story. It's a more recent story, as it turns out to be, a later version, fashioned by the priestly tradition. A bit more sophisticated than that first story. And one of its primary objectives was to promote the keeping of the Sabbath. The story in Genesis chapter 1 has God creating 8 creative acts squeezed into 6 creative days, so that on the 7th day, God could rest. God could take a break, reinforcing the practice of Sabbath rest and worship. Let me read that story. Barashith bara Elohim. That's the way it starts in Hebrew, okay? In English, I could go further, of course, but in English it sounds like this. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. And God said, "Let there be a dome in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." So God made the dome, and separated the waters that were under the dome from the waters that were above the dome, a space. And it was so. God called the dome sky. And there was evening and there was morning, the second day. And God said, "Let the waters under the sky be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the earth put forth vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees of every kind on the earth that bear fruit with the seed in it." And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed of every kind, and trees of every kind bearing fruit with the seed in it. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the third day. And God said, "Let there be light in the dome of the sky to separate the day from the night. And let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. And let them be lights in the dome of the sky to give light upon the earth." And it was so. God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. God set them in the dome of the sky to give light upon the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, the fourth day. And God said, "Let the waters bring forth swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the dome of the sky." So God created the great sea monsters and every living creature that moves of every kind with which the waters swarm, and every winged bird of every kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth." And there was evening and there was morning, the fifth day. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth living creatures of every kind, cattle and creeping things and wild animals of the earth of every kind." And it was so. God made the wild animals of the earth of every kind, and cattle of every kind, and everything that creeps upon the ground of every kind. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness. And let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth." So God created humankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth." God said, "See, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the air, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food." And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all their multitude. And on the seventh day God finished the work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all the work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and hallowed it, because on it God rested from all the work that he had done in creation. These are the generations of the heavens and the earth when they were created. That's the story. Four important faith statements from that story. First of all, God initiates something wonderful. And in doing so, God has no rivals. There are no struggles. There are no other gods to take into consideration. God says something, God acts, and it is done. Secondly, what God creates is good. There are some religious systems that see the world as evil, something from which it would be good to escape. But in the Genesis story, life on this earth is good. It is affirming. It is wonderful. Thirdly, the humans are responsible for earth care. The humans are responsible for Earth care. Whatever you may think about the Paris Climate Accord, whether you were for it or against it, what is inescapable is that we humans are responsible for Earth care. Not for ourselves, for those who will follow us. And fourthly, there's a rhythm in life, and that rhythm is work and rest, activity and reflection, doing and just being. The God life is a life of balance and a life of proportion. So friends, that's how our faith story begins. That's the story of our origins. It's a beautiful place, this world of ours. There's a creative, involved God who is hovering over all that God has done. The humans are put in charge of keeping up the property. The humans are put in charge of keeping up the property. However, things quickly deteriorate. By chapter 4 of Genesis, the two brothers, Cain and Abel, have a squabble, and Cain ends up killing his brother Abel. Fratricide. And things don't get much better after that. In those stories, there are stories of jealousies, of warfare, of strife, acts of inhumanity, usually with a very thin veneer of religious justification, oftentimes blaming God for what they are doing, as if God wants that kind of behavior of the good that God has created. There are many anthropologists who say that our earliest human ancestors came out of Africa. Seems to be pretty universally believed that we all come from one common beginning, and from that common beginning, humans have spread over the earth. In doing so, in spreading over the earth, we have taken on distinctive characteristics, like facial features and skin color and customs and histories, that even though genetically we are part of one amazingly similar family, we have found numerous ways of dividing that similar family into various tribes and subgroups. We carefully have divided the world into those who are like us that we should like in return, and those we have deemed to be not like us and therefore not as worthy. We have often blindly defended members of our own subgroups, ethnically, religiously, politically, racially, and are harsh and judgmental toward others that we do not see as being one of us. Every war, ever fought has been a family fight. Every war is a family fight. Brothers and sisters pitted against brothers and sisters. And we have tried to justify such aggressions, such fierce loyalties under the banner of nationalism and patriotism, or of self-survival, or religious purity, or more honestly, self-interest. We tend to emphasize our differences, what is unalike and foreign to us, and we fail to celebrate our commonness, that we are all part of one big, diverse God family from which we have all come. It is an embarrassment to me that the people who honor our Hebrew scriptures have invested a whole lot of time and centuries contesting with each other. Christianity, remember, grew out of Jewish roots 2,000 years ago. And the story of our relationship with our Jewish family members contains many countless acts of inhumanity. Christians, being the dominant major group most of the time, bear most of the responsibility for the inhumanity of Christians against Jews. Islam also grew out of Jewish roots about 1,400 years ago. And again, that history has been stained by acts of cruelty and misunderstanding and open conflict. All three of those major religions claim one single common ancestor, Abraham. All go back to Abraham. But we also share Moses, the great prophets, the beautiful Psalms, and yet we have been unwilling, unable to open our arms and our hearts to each other more recently. All three religions, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, can point to magnificent practitioners of these great religions, people of grace and love and insight, wisdom, courage. And all three of those religions are embarrassed by others who twist a holy faith into terrible atrocities, horrible acts of carnage and destruction. The revival of the Ku Klux Klan began in our state of Indiana in the early 1900s. It had been dormant for a while. Greenwood being one of the centers, not far from here, but there were other places. The result was years of intimidation of persons of color, cross burnings, property destruction, hangings, acts of inhumanity. Many of the members of the Klan were Christians. Folks who burned crosses on Saturday night showed up for church on Sunday mornings and didn't see that to be an inconsistency. We don't want you here, and we're going to find ways that you won't be here. When cleaning out a closet in an old church, folks found some white robes way in the back, and those white robes were not meant for baptisms or confirmations. Those white robes had hoods on them in a church closet. Way in the back, thank goodness, but still there. Some of our present-day white supremacy groups hide behind a veneer of Christianity as well. Certainly they are not the best representatives we would choose for our Christian faith. I wonder who sponsored the billboard not far away from here painting the Prophet Muhammad, central figure of Islam, in the worst possible light, targeting our new enemy, Muslims, and the whole religion of Islam. We need to take the lead in combating Muslim baiting. It's all around us. Suspicion of those who practice Islam. Yes, they too have their bad actors distorting their faith, saying that they are acting on behalf of Allah, but they are really terrorists. They are not religious practitioners. And not all Muslims are terrorists by any means. A great majority of Muslims you would love to have as your next door neighbor if in fact you came to know them and they came to know you. They are members of God's big, diverse, single family. It is true that we live in stressful times. There's a lot of fear around. Emotions are raw. There's a lot of suspicions of those who are not part of our tribal group. And so the decision for us is simply this. What will win out and what will dominate this time going forward? Will it be our theological oneness, that we have one common denominator, and that is the Creator of all of us? Our common parents at the beginning of human time, believing in these stories of the origin in Genesis, that we are here together? Or will it be the ideological distinctions that cram us into our tribes? Tribes of skin color or ethnic heritage or sexuality or socioeconomic strata or political affiliation or religious orientation. Those are our subgroups. And each of us is a member of a number of those subgroups. But each of us is also a member of a larger whole called the children of God. So friends, live bravely a life of acceptance and grace in these troubling times. Find it possible to welcome both the familiar and the stranger. Build bridges of understanding and appreciation, and listen carefully to each other. Be curious about that member of our family, the big family, the God family, the one you have not formally met yet, but may be in this coming week. That person is a child of God, just as much as you are a child of God, and just as much as I am. Amen.